Thank you, Ms. Keys-Maloney. The next question, Mr. Schroth will go first. Police Chief Robert Colton is retiring in February, and council may be called upon to make some important decisions about the Ewing police force. Should Ewing hire another chief, or hire a civilian director who is not a sworn police officer to lead the force? And what other ideas do you have for the future of the Ewing Police Department?
Whether or not we continue with a police chief or hire a civilian director is something that has to be carefully evaluated and carefully considered and carefully studied. Ewing Township is not a large police department. It's a police department, I think, of about 70 police officers. So we are not obviously faced with the complexities that you're faced with in New York City, where you have a population of millions of people and a police department that is a virtual army. And literally, we know today, conducts intelligence operations overseas. So it's something you have to look at. You have to evaluate the pros and the cons, and ultimately, that's something the mayor is going to have to decide and then bring before council. There are benefits and detriments, I think, to both. Certainly, a civilian director is someone who may be more responsive to the mayor since he's appointed. Theoretically, it could politicize the department, so you have to be careful about how you handle that. City of Trenton recently did it. They went from having a police chief for years to having a civilian director, and at various times they've had trouble finding someone to take the job. So certainly you have that added dimension to the problem, or the situation, I should say. It's not a problem. It's a good choice because it creates opportunities for us to evaluate and consider. And you have to study it. You have to study it and look at the size of our town, look at the size of the police department vis-a-vis the town, and make the decision based on the totality of the circumstances, including the crime situation in the township. Is it something that somehow benefits us from a safety perspective or not? So that's one we have to evaluate when the time comes and evaluate all the pros and the cons.
Thank you, Mr. Schroth. Mr. Steward?
Thank you. As a council person in Ewing Township, if I had the honor to take part in those conversations, I would tell you that I would start, the starting point for myself would be to maintain a strong chief of police in this town. Why? Because I just feel that the alternative is just too complex to think about, and I've seen what has happened in other neighboring towns when they take that route. The police right now are at one of their lowest levels in the last 10 years or more. I believe that the 2011 annual report by the Chief of Police this year, which is on the website, by the way, and I would encourage everybody to go home and pick up the most recent 2011 report, and they also have reports from previous years. Look at them. Right now, there are crime statistics that are going up while we are at our lowest levels. We do need to, I believe that we need to beef up our police, especially based upon where we are as a community. We also have some knowledge, it's been reported in the media that there's a significant number of police officers that are getting ready to retire in the next 2 years, by 2014. So yes, we are at low levels, but obviously we have to, if those officers are going to retire, we have to replace them before that retirement. So we are going to have an increase, but I want to see the net police force expanded. And it has to do, again, with that idea of Ewing being a destination.
Okay. That is all the time we have. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Steward. Mr. Samil?
I personally believe I would favor the retention of a uniformed police officer as the chief of police. One of the things that we have to recognize in this town is that there are two lines of authority for our police. One emanates from the Attorney General and the prosecutor at the county level. And the statute, I guess I don't want to get too technical, but state statute 52 and others that give police their power would certainly transcend anything that would occur with a civilian police director. Albeit you might find a civilian police director that has the police background and have been a commissioned police officer that may be able to do the job of a uniformed police officer, irrespective of him or her being a civilian. But I think, as was stated earlier by David, yes, there are some issues about how complicated it would become and whether or not there would be room for political intrusion into the operations of our police department. Police are about an organization of discipline, and council and administration should be about an organization of management. And we ought to be able to manage our police department and make certain that things occur in their operation that is consistent with what we believe ought to happen in a police organization without removing the statutory uniform police, chief of police operation in our unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samil. Mr. Baxter?
As previously stated, I mean, uniformed police, another police chief, or a civilian public safety director, I mean, they both have their pros and cons. And it is a decision that the mayor is at his privy, and once he brings it to us, we'll make our decision there. Me being a retired correction officer, law enforcement is near and dear to my heart. And I kind of already have an idea where my decision may lay. But I would hope that our police, whoever it is, whether it's a director or a chief, that they will be more responsive to what's happening in the community. I mean, we are right now, unfortunately, the one thing I would have with our police department was pray good health back to those that are out right now on disability, unfortunately. So the staffing is a little low, but when we're at full staff at all times, the chief has a chance to make sure that his troops are out, they're doing their job, they're moving around, they have a presence. Right now, we do have retirement coming on, but we also will be filling those vacancies. I mean, we're not just going to sit there and let people retire and not fill the vacancies. So when you look at the public safety, it will not be compromised by whatever way we go, because we are going to have a police force. And public safety is not always just lying in the police. I mean, we have 3 great firehouses. I mean, that's public safety. We have great EMTs. We have great dispatchers. So Ewing safety is always a priority for the council as well as the mayor and administration. So we look at all these. It's a whole totality that we take in, and that we want to make sure that every citizen feels comfortable and feels safe in Ewing at all times. So, like I said, either way we go, whether we go police chief or director of public safety, we will definitely put the same onus on them to make sure that our public safety stays a #1 priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baxter. Mr. Lester?
If you take a look into history, government's original purpose was the security of the people. A bunch of people got together, decided that they needed some kind of force to protect the people in their towns. I think that makes the Ewing Police Department priority #1. I cannot support a civilian police director. I believe in my heart that it's an avenue for cronyism. I think that police should run police, and I think that the state agrees me by their statute. I personally know what it's like for civilian directives to ruin a paramilitary organization. When I was in the Marine Corps, I ran a jail. That explains my demeanor. In running that jail, anytime a civilian stepped foot on ground, morale dropped. Security became a risk. So when you place a civilian police director in charge of 70, 80 very capable men, and you have them try and tell them their day-to-day and their way to play, your morale is going to drop so low. You're going to decrease your revenue. They're not going to ticket people. They're going to take their time. They're going to try to make that police director look very bad. Now, you put one of their own up there, and they got his back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lester. Ms. Keys-Maloney.
You've heard from many of my colleagues about the benefits and detriments of the choice of whether to go with a police director or a police chief. I think regardless of the choice that we make, it has to be done with deliberation and care and consult with the administration, who will be in the driver's seat with us in the passenger seat, kind of deciding this very critical item. But it has to be done not in a vacuum, because it's not just about whoever the head of the department is, it's also about the changes that you've heard. We have a large number of officers who may or may not be retiring. We have to look at that. We also have to look at not necessarily just who would fill that role right now, but what that role would be like in the future. You know, in my professional life, I represent school principals, and I represent them before the State Board of Education. And the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, in consult with the governor in the past, didn't necessarily make appointments to the State Board of Ed, and that had a deleterious impact when suddenly there were a number of vacancies and you couldn't make decisions on the board itself. And then suddenly we filled those vacancies all at once, and you didn't have a cross-section of the community that suddenly was part of that board. The reason I bring the example up is because we really need to look at this holistically. We have to make some choices about the department as a whole, with some research to back that up, and look at what the impact will be regardless of who we choose for chief, but, you know, or police director, but ultimately what that new department will look like. It may not just be about what we're doing at the top of the agency, but also how that changes with the number of retirements. Certainly, in my mind, police presence on the streets is essential. We have to ensure public safety. I think there needs to be a balance between responsiveness and also authority, the authority of whoever is the head of that agency. And I think there needs to be open dialogue. You know, we had Chief Colton into my Lions Club recently, and he talked about how we used to have community caretaking kind of programming that they had done. Those are things that I would like to see returned, because it's all about us looking out for each other in addition to the police helping us look out for each other. So in short, it's a tough decision to make, and I think we need to do it as a group and in light of all the other changes that may be going on at the same time in a very vital department.
Thank you, Ms. Keys-Maloney. Mr. Prykanowski.
A fully trained police officer is the only one that's qualified to run a police department. Title 40 says that the chief has to come from within the department. If currently we don't have anybody who's able to rise to that occasion, and that may be the reason why the administration is looking at a civilian director, I would only be in favor of one thing, and that would be a 2-year professional contract from a retired police officer, chief of police, or state officer, a state trooper, someone who's had police experience. They would go in, look at the department, reorganize the department, target or select 1 or 2 individuals and mentor them to be the next chief of police. and also take a look at returning to community policing, which we don't do right now. Also bring back the gang unit. For the most part, Ewing is a fairly safe community, but we have a lot of influx from our neighbors to the south, and I don't want to see Ewing Township be ripe for the pickings for the ne'er-do-wells from another community. I've had experience over the years when I was a councilman in Hightstown with a mediocre chief of police, and believe me, a mediocre chief of police doesn't do much for the morale. I worked for Plainsboro, and I saw a chief of police who took a department and turned it around completely, and it's one of the best police officers, police departments in that Route 1 corridor. And also I had experience with a mediocre police director, and believe me, I'd rather have a good chief of police than a civilian director.